Hi, this is the Weird Christian, and I'm going to be talking about contrails and chemtrails. And Danielle Smith addressing the chemtrail controversy, I guess. Anyway, but I think first things first is that I see there's a problem with people. We really have a hard time to figure out what is going on in the world. And the reason is because we have not learned how to find out what is truth, because we do not know what truth is. Some people say that they have their truth, and you have and you have your own truth. This is to actually say, I don't know what truth is, or it's to say that the universe revolves around an individual. So to say, basically, if you're saying, I have my truth, you're essentially, and you have your truth, you're basically saying everyone's a narcissist. And because the universe revolves around the individual. Okay? So to say that statement, basically you're saying I'm a narcissist and I am the biggest narcissist, especially if I have to make you believe what my truth is. If I had, you have to believe it, or else you're against the order of my truth. And I can, you should go to prison or get fined or whatever. Now, you can see that reaction to all the people that hold this fallacy of what truth is. And that includes governments and other individuals, societies, so forth and so on. And when you look up people who talk about truth, they will talk about pragmatic truth and consistent truth and coherent truth and so forth. It's one's truth where you build on truth, and one's works in one's truth with reality. It's contextual truth. They talk about that kind of thing, and it's for building systems of truth. Okay, which is not what truth is about at all. And these are ways that people in universities talk about truth. Truth isn't about a system or building systems using pragmatism or contextual or working. That's not what truth is about. Okay. And truth, you can't have your own truth. When you say that, you can have your own opinion, but when you say you're having your own truth, you're essentially saying the universe revolves around what I say. And it's basically being the ultimate narcissist. And when you become a narcissist, basically you're a sociopath. You can't relate to the universe with other people or even yourself properly. So, don't say that kind of stuff. There's lots of things that people say that just shows where they don't understand things. Okay? So this is why I want to make it very plain what truth is. Because when you understand what truth is, then you can find truth. And you won't get blown around by all different crazy ideas by people. And you don't have to have somebody tell you what the truth is. They can tell you something, and then you can use truth to figure out if it's true or not. Okay? So, and truth is not the truth that you know is a search. Okay? So you may have some truth, like let's say Newton had some truth about how the world works. He figured out, there were certain rules and he made them up, and they were pretty accurate for most situations. Okay? But further questioning and of observation made, like Einstein and other people started thinking that though Newton had some pretty good ideas about how the order of things. Now, he didn't know how they worked, but he would figure out, like gravity. Okay, gravity on Earth makes things fall at a certain rate and so forth. And, it's something to do with mass and so forth. And he knew that, but that's not to know what gravity is. That's just to know how it works and give it a name. Okay. It doesn't say what it is. It just says how it behaves. Okay. So, and then Einstein found it, what different things like light, the properties of light, in a better understanding, except there was still a lot of ideas about what light is from the double slit experiment. So it's a search, so you can find out more precisely what truth is. Use a search for truth. Okay, and this is what you do with a search. You question, and if it works, if it fulfills the requirements of the questions, of the premises of truth, then it's true. And sometimes you start learning more questions when you do more observations, so you can get closer to what is really happening. Okay, but sometimes from the observations you're at, it looks like everything's working fine. But then somebody will notice that, it's not quite consistent. So I noticed that inconsistency. So then they'll look a little bit more deeper, which is what Einstein did to Newton's laws. He looked a little deeper, and because there was an inconsistency. So then he found out that this, the theory of relativity and general relativity and all that kind of stuff. So, okay, so that's just my little preamble about what truth is, because people don't know what truth is. Truth is consistent. So if a statement is said and it's consistent, meaning that a man is not a woman, the earth is not water, these things that are not the same. You can't say that things that are not the same are the same. When you do that, you're being inconsistent. Therefore, you're not talking about truth. Okay? So, a bachelor a bachelor is not married, basically, the idea. Or a square is not a circle. So, when you say that a square is a circle, you're not saying truth, because that's inconsistent. Okay, also, truth is omnipresent, which means it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Doesn't matter where you go, truth is the same. That is why in science they can figure out the properties of gases on Earth. Like, let's say you put some light through it and you get a certain color of it. So then they can look at a star and, at the temperature, whatever, they can see, it's giving off this light. Therefore, it is made up of these gases. Because even though it's way far away, they can use the properties on Earth to figure out what's going up in heaven. Okay? Or in space. Okay, so that's where it is omnipresent. Okay? And it's eternal. Now, the eternal is not fixed on time. Eternal is more than time. It's about qualities of periods. Okay, you can have no time, and there's eternality in there, because there's a certain quality in that period or that space. Well, it's not even, it may not be space, but there's a certain quality in that when there's nothing created. Okay, so eternal is beyond time, but it means that it's essentially, you can use the principles of eternal to say, well, maybe that star out there is, like they say, the sun is 8 minutes away by light. Okay, so the speed of light. So what's happening on the sun, we're getting a delayed response. But still, the properties that are working on Earth work on the sun, so you can figure out. And the properties that work deep in space, maybe some people will have a hard time with this, but maybe they're millions of years away. Like maybe the light we're seeing is millions of years old, let's say. And that property of truth about gases is still consistent with what's going on Earth right now. Therefore, these are the properties of truth that you can use to explore the universe, or explore relationships, or explore anything. Any statement can be you can use truth. You use the premises of truth with this consistency, omnipresence, and eternality. And when you use questions and they all answer those questions to the best that you can understand, then you have some kind of truth. And it's a search. Because you may not observe all the things that can be observed. And therefore, you may not even know that you're not being consistent, because like Isaac Newton didn't know that he thought he was dealing pretty good. Okay, so he had a truth, but it was not, when people searched more, they found a more precise truth. Okay, so that was a long talk about truth. It could be a lot longer, but I think it's very, very, very important that people understand what truth is. And it's a search, okay? It's not a system, okay? And it's not being pragmatic truth and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you can kind of use it like that, but that's not really what truth is about, okay? I just wanted to make sure. And there's lots of people that are smart, but they have not learned what truth is. Therefore, they cannot think for themselves on the deeper issues of life or in science or whatever, because they do not know what truth is. Therefore, they can't really think for themselves, and they rely on others. Okay? So if you know what truth is, you can use that to actually think for yourself. Therefore, you can get a fairly good understanding of what's going on around you. And there's many people that don't know how to do that. In fact, they don't teach that. They don't teach people how to think. They teach people how to accept somebody else's word, as an authority, okay? And a lot of times, I'll just keep going a little bit on this because it's very important for the preamble for what I'm going to be talking about next. Because what has happened is that some people back in history, they've actually found some pretty good ideas that are truthful, but those ideas have been associated with authorities, and authorities are lying all the time. Okay, so therefore, when people found out that they're lying, they say, okay, everything that they've said to me is a lie. So they just thrown out everything because they have not learned what truth is. So they can't discern what is wrong and what is right, what is up and what is down. Okay. Therefore, they come up with a lot of statements, and they can be easily gaslit. So they're very confused, and they'll just believe anything. And you don't have to be, there's many smart people. In fact, there's people that have set up laws and societies and systems. They don't know what truth is, and they are way off, and but they promoted it, and they think they know because they haven't asked questions, deeply questions. They just accepted what somebody else has said. Okay, and that is what the Westminster parliamentary system is all about, and the court system. They've accepted Calvinism, which is kind of an idea that's come out of Now, they won't believe it, but basically it's a age of enlightenment idea in France. It's the same philosophy, and that's come out of a more ancient philosophy of Gnosticism. And Gnosticism is close enough, but it's been going on for longer than, I mean, it was around, Gnostics were around, you know, what people call Gnostics around the time of Christ or just after, or even before that, but they didn't start calling them Gnostics till later, okay? And then they say, but Gnosticism has been around since the beginning of man. So it's been around for a long time. And it's basically because people are making up their own truth and they want the world to revolve around them. That's the basics of Gnosticism. There's one of the basics. There's many more. But okay, so don't think just because I'm going to say some things next that I'm saying you're stupid. Because there's lots of brilliant people who have not questioned enough. The biggest thing that makes a difference is to question using the premises of truth. If you don't know what truth is and you don't know what the premises are, you can't even start. It doesn't matter how smart you are. Okay, you're just boxing, shadow boxing, because you can't actually box with something. You can't actually dance with anything because you don't know what is the basis of reality. Okay, it doesn't matter how smart you are. Okay, yeah, that's. I know it's a long preamble, but I'm just going to like 60 minutes already, 17 minutes already, and we're just talking about truth. But I think it's really important. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next point. Okay, so Danielle Smith. Now she was asked about contrails, and she was smart because what happened is there's a bunch of people that are trying to make people not travel in the air using jets. They want to keep people grounded. It's a psyop operation. And one of the things that they use for the psyop operation is to say that jets are making chemtrails in the air. It's the idea of stopping travel, getting people to believe that the jets are causing massive amount of pollution in the air because they can see contrails in the air. They call them chemtrails. Okay. Now they're at higher elevations. There's a reason for that. What's going on? Anyway, Danielle Smith, she said, basically she had to kind of avoid the conversation in, in this here. Let's see. In this, like they've been talking about contrails and all that kind of stuff. And she didn't suggest that. She just said she's trying to, if there's a problem, maybe the U.S. is doing it, but it's not what's going on. Even the idea of it, just on the idea point. Where did I got that there? Oh no, that's not it. Yeah, right. Even the idea of trying to pollute the atmosphere using jets in the air is, if you wanted to pollute the atmosphere, that's the most expensive way to do it. It's so expensive, and it's so like 30,000 feet up in the air. There's all these air currents and everything. That stuff that's going above your head is in China when if it ever comes down. It may stay up there for years because it's up there in the air. And anyway, so the idea that it's polluting is because you're underneath of it, is you don't even understand what's going on in the atmosphere at all. Okay. So, because you haven't asked questions, what is actually going on in the atmosphere? So, Okay, here I'm talking all about, air qualities and what's in the atmosphere. And here it's talking about water vapor, concentrations of water vapor. That's essentially what's going on. And as you heat up the air, you can have more water vapor. It says here at 20 degrees Celsius, water twice as much water vapor is in the air than at 10 degrees Celsius. Okay. So, and this is why, and then it's got 0.001. They always want to say there's, not very much water vapor, but to about 4%. That's how much water vapor is in the air, like in a tropical area, because it's warmer, so you get more water vapor in the air. And maybe in a really cold and dry area, it would be like that. It's very rare. Usually it's probably around 2% or 1% of the air has that much water vapor. It's nothing near this. This is like that'd be super dry air. There's not very many places that would have that at all. Okay, so, and as it gets hotter, you hold more water vapor. Okay, and you have to understand that the air you see, there's bubbles of air. Like there's parts that are warmer and colder, like bubbles in it. You can't see them because air is translucent. So you can't see these bubbles. You can't see the layers of the air. It's not like rock where you can see different layers. It's translucent at all sorts of temperatures. Okay, so like for instance, air can be 100% relative humidity saturated. Okay, and that might be 100% relative humidity might be in the tropical 4% of the air, water vapor in the air. That could be saturated with the water. Like it's like how much, like if you make salt water, if you put salt in it, in part of it will get dissolved, but if you stir it up, more of it will get dissolved, so you can really saturate it. But once it gets to a certain point, it won't hold any more salt. So the salt crystals will just be salt. Doesn't matter how much you stir it or whatever, the salt will not absorb because it's already saturated. But it's not all salt. There's lots of water in it. Same with the air. There's water in it. It's not all water. Otherwise we'd be in the ocean. But a certain amount of water is in the air. So, as you can see, here is there. This is kind of just a general temperature gauge from altitude, and there's more layers, but this is just kind of a general idea of what's going on, and they do it from temperatures. Okay, so here we have kilometers in the air. 10,000 kilometers is, it's in kilometers, 10,000 meters is about 6 miles. Okay, and that's about 12 miles and so forth. You just multiply it by 6, or you multiply it by 0.6 and you get the miles. And so that's about 6 miles. So 6 miles. It's if you want to talk about meters, it's about 10,000, meters, right? And airplanes fly at, let's say, 30,000 feet. Okay, which is about that height. Okay, so you can see that the temperature is at sea level. Let's say it's here they got about 10 degrees Celsius, and as you get higher up to about 30,000 feet, it gets colder. Okay. And then it goes at about 20,000 feet, or 60,000 feet, I mean, it gets, or 20 kilometers, it gets to, it kind of stops getting colder at about, it's minus 40, which is pretty cold. And then it starts getting warmer. This is because the density of this air and the sun and different things, the kind of gases that are up there, they change in temperature. And then it starts getting colder again, and then it gets warmer again, just because of the different pressures and temperatures and the type of gases up in different parts of the atmosphere. And this is getting way up there. That's like in space, almost. Anyway, so... and there's also different layers of, it's not like a straight line like this. Some parts it's all to do with pressure and so forth. And so you get most of the clouds probably are around in this area. They could be higher. They can go up to like 36,000 feet, and then they hit different walls because of the temperature. So you have cutoffs and breaks and so forth. So it's not just one homogeneous, air is not just one homogeneous thing. It's got layers in it, like a cake, and bubbles in it, and all sorts of stuff are going on in the atmosphere that you can't see because you just can't see it, because it's translucent to our eyes. If you had the right kind of optics on it, like maybe Doppler radar or something like that, you can actually see the different layers and so forth. But with our eyes, we cannot see the layers. But it's like a layer cake, and it's moving all the time. It's like the ocean with different currents. You have different thicknesses of water at different places, and currents going different ways, going by each other. You can see clouds going one direction in one height and another direction at another height. That's because, and they're different pressures and so forth. So when you look at the sky, it's not just one homogeneous thing. That's very important to understand. And here is a chart that they made. I just pulled it up, and it talks about the composition of our exhaled air. Now it says there's like 78% nitrogen and oxygen, and these things, their density differs at different temperature to each other. Okay? And it says other gases, and they say only, less than 1%. Now but they don't even include water vapor in here. There's a reason why they're doing that, because they're trying to downplay what water vapor is. Okay? And then they talk about carbon dioxide. That's out of your breath, which is way, way, way higher than the atmosphere. Okay? In the atmosphere, it's, let's say, it's about 1,000th of that, I think. Maybe a 100th of this amount. It's where you put decimal point. It's 0.04%. So about 100th of this amount of coming out of your mouth. So going in, it's about 0.04. Going out, it's 4.4. That's how much carbon dioxide you blow going out. And water, you got argon here and other gases. Other gases are more like water vapor, and it's more than 1% coming out. I know when I breathe out, I have probably 3 or 4% coming out, water vapor out of my mouth. I'm quite hydrated, and I sweat a lot. I'm sending out a lot of water vapor. And yeah, so my mouth is it's got lots of saliva in there. There's all sorts of water vapor coming out of me. And it's way higher than this. But they don't want to talk about water vapor because it's the greatest greenhouse gas, and they want to promote the idea that it's carbon dioxide that's changing everything, okay? But if you actually know truth and you actually start questioning, you can find out that they're all lying about climate change. It's a narrative that they're trying to promote, okay? But I'm just using this, this is what I got off, and they're still trying to promote that in this chart. I'm just saying. But I've done more studying and I understand what's going on. So I can question this and the results, but mostly it's kind of correct. Yeah, but there's lots of water. There's lots of water vapor coming out of your mouth and your nose. Okay. Here in the cold, like in the warm, you cannot see your breath. I can't see my breath right now because I'm in a house. It's like 20 above Celsius. You won't be able to see my breath. But if it was like 20 below Celsius, there'd be all sorts of vapor coming out of me. And that's it's still the same amount of vapor coming out, water vapor coming out of me, but you'd be able to see it. And it's basically a cloud coming out. And there's other gases too. There's nitrogen and so forth that comes out. And, because I breathe in nitrogen, I breathe out the same nitrogen, and the oxygen, and there's water vapor. Okay, but there's lots of water vapor. That's why you can see your breath. You're making a cloud. Okay. And a jet engine, they're thrusting out, lots of, carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide probably, and a few other gases, but they also do a water vapor. And I don't know how much water vapor they do out of their exhaust, but part of the combustion thing is you get some water vapor. If you look at some exhaust on a car, you get the same thing. You'll see water dripping out of the exhaust because there's some water vapor coming out. And you'll see in the wintertime, it'll have smoke, which is not really smoke mostly. It's just the water vapor that you see. When you burn gas, you'll see water vapor. It's not pollution. It's water, unless you want to call water pollution, the stuff that you drink, the stuff that keeps us alive. If you want to call that pollution, well, some people do, I suppose. Okay? But it's what keeps us alive. So here, like, it's 24,000 pound-feet of thrust, okay? And which is, when you're throwing that much air through this, like, that's the idea, is throw lots of air through here, heat it up and send it out, and you're going to get, some of the exhaust is going to be water vapor, and it's thrown out, and it's heating up the air, but it's in a cooler environment. So when you have warm air hitting cold air, you get a cloud. That's what happens. And if you get warm air in the warm air, you're not going to get a cloud. That's why you don't get contrails when an airplane is landing, because it's already warm air. It can hold a lot more moisture in the air. But up high, the air can't hold so much moisture as in a sense, but it'll hold, so you get a cloud, and the cloud stays there because the air, the nitrogen and everything is a little bit heavy. It's a little bit more dense, and the water vapor would be a bit more lighter, so it'll hold it into there so that the cloud doesn't drop. The density of the cloud is not enough to go through the atmosphere, because the nitrogen and the oxygen, well, the nitrogen will hold it in place. That's why you have a cloud at a certain temperature. But eventually, if it gets enough, the temperatures change and so forth, and you'll get rain. Like inside a cloud, it might get big and cloudy, and then it might get colder. Then it'll hold less water. So then the water kind of, you oversaturate it, so then you make drops Like you start doing drops and they'll start turning into water and then it'll fall. So that's kind of how a cloud works. If you can just imagine it, just try to think about it for a bit. Okay, so we got the temperature differences and the different pressures. So planes are flying around the troposphere height, your normal plane, that's about 35,000 feet. And you can see how much colder it is here, minus 40. The temperature of the air coming out of the airplane is, probably like 1,000 degrees or right out, or at least, and it'll stay warm, like it'll keep its warmth. So it'll be hundreds of degrees and then it'll cool off eventually, So that's why it's holding all that air, and then it hits the cold air around and it makes clouds. So what's going on? It's just clouds. Here it's showing the whole thing. If you short lift, like it's maybe just, here's the idea that the air has bubbles in it. And there's different pressures and so when the plane flies through from one where it's a little bit warmer to where it's a little bit colder, you'll get a cloud. Because the air can't hold the same amount of water, and so forth. And so it'll show a cloud. It's like blowing your, making your own breath, making a cloud. You're making a cloud. Here, it's the same thing. It's louder in there, and then you get things where it's in there more, and it'll show up for a longer time. Okay? So it's just a cloud. Now, there was times, because the government has been an awful thing at times, okay? I mean, they have done experiments on people, especially during the nuclear age, where they were testing people, how radioactive materials would affect them and so forth. And but they would fly at low levels, and they would, kind of put a dust or a mist out and just let the, radioactive material fall. They would just fly maybe 1,000 or 2,000 feet above the air, above the land mass, and just disperse radioactive material. I mean, I'm not saying that the government won't do that kind of thing. They have done it in the past. They've blown up nuclear bombs close to people. They've done all sorts of things. People have done all sorts of, not just the government, but people have done all sorts of things in the past. And, profits or greed or whatever, or just some people like to experiment on people. We all know about that. And they'll experiment on others and so forth. So, I'm not saying that there hasn't been chemtrails, yes, but they're not really chemtrails. It just drops smoke and pollution. And they've been using like pesticides and so forth, and they just spray fields. And then there's all sorts of things going on. I'm not saying there isn't, but they're not using commercial jets to pollute the atmosphere any more than just the normal fuel does, it doesn't really pollute the atmosphere very much. It burns different things, but they're not really that big of pollutants compared to what the amount of air volume going through them. It's just not very much at all. And it'd be a really bad amount of, if you want to kill people, there's much more efficient ways of doing that. It would be one of the most inefficient ways of doing it that you could do it. Okay. So, now I'm not saying that they don't like spray clouds, and they may at times, spray different things in the atmosphere. Okay. I'm not saying they won't, but to do it with a jet at a high altitude where you see these contrails, the reason why they're doing it's a psyop operation to make people not want people to fly in airplanes, just the regular people. It's a psyop operation against the populace, really. It's people trying to get people to not use jets for travel. And that's it, really. There's lots of psyop operations. The Coots thing, people were told to go down to the Coots to block the thing. It was just used as a psyop to incriminate the truck movement. Now that's, and so they had people down there, and then they said they were blocking traffic, which they didn't. The RCMP actually blocked the traffic, and then they did, their psyop operations of, we found all these weapons. Yeah, where they show us how you found them. They just took them out of storage and put them there and said, these people have these weapons. They're, yes, authoritarians are liars. As I said before, the Westminster parliamentary system and its court system is based on being a hypocrite and an authoritarian. It's the exact opposite of the Magna Carta. Okay, they're opposing law systems. Opposing. One promotes socialism, communism, all that kind of crap. They want to use social contract, which they say, we'll take your ownership and responsibility and we'll take care of you. That's what social contract is about, which was promoted by Rousseau and promoted by John Locke and all these other guys. And basically it was the sign of the times from the Age of Enlightenment, which is Gnosticism. But I'm not going to talk about that much more here. I just wanted to make sure, don't fall for the psyop of blaming chemtrails. Because people that can actually know something about science will say, you just lose your credibility. Really, you do. You have to be able to learn to use truth to actually discern what is true and what's not. What's real, what's not. Okay? And that's what I have to say about that. Because people don't use truth. They just, if you don't use truth, you won't be able to discern what is going on. You won't be able to. Doesn't matter how smart or brilliant you are. If you don't know how to ask questions and ask the right questions, you won't know. So that's all I'm going to say today. May you search for truth, and may God bless you and bring you peace.